All right, welcome to our next installment of the Whole Body Migraine Assessment call. So for those of you who are not yet familiar with what this call is, this is basically kind of a whole body assessment of what's going on with particular symptom patterns that will help us to clue in as far as the unique imbalances that are happening for a particular individual's migraines. So this week we have Amanda. And Amanda shared with me a little history of her symptoms and kind of noted some of the patterns that I see based on her application form. And so I'm going to be going over that today for her, and as well as your understanding, so that you can kind of see this process and what this looks like. So the conventional approach of just throwing medications at it and hoping something sticks is really not very scientific, and it's not utilizing the information and understanding we have of migraines in particular, but of the body in general. And we can't treat chronic migraines so simplistically. That's why you're not finding any relief with your migraine treatment, is because it's much too simplistic and it's not taking into account everything that's going on for you. And there is a lot about your body and the symptoms you're experiencing that will give us those clues so that we understand where your particular combination of imbalances are happening. That allows us to move forward in healing as we address those. So in the whole body migraine assessment, I'm going to review the information that Amanda shared with us today and kind of evaluate the picture that I'm seeing based on that information. And we're going to be looking at what those patterns reveal about her migraines to give her a little bit more targeted information on where to go next to help address some of those imbalances. So let's dive in. So Amanda, she's been waiting a long time for this video. So let's get into it. So right off the bat, one of the things that she shares is a history of diagnosis of allergic rhinitis, IBS symptoms, chronic fatigue, and depression. So this right here, those previous diagnoses, gives us a lot of information about your migraines and what's going on. So depression and migraines, the commonality there is serotonin issues. So there's going to be a serotonin component. At some point, I just recorded it. It'll be up in the next week or 3, depending on when it's being released. But there's a video on serotonin and migraines, or depression and migraines is what I titled it. It's going to be an important listen for you. Okay. I won't go into all of that here because it's really in depth and it would take like the whole time anyway. Allergic rhinitis. So this is going to be a histamine component. So there's going to be a histamine issue. I'll talk about that here in a minute. IBS. So I've mentioned multiple times in various videos about the gut-brain connection, and that there is a lot of information that's come out over the last decade about how inflammation in the gut will increase things like depression, anxiety, mood disorders, and migraines. So we have a well-documented connection between gut issues and migraines. So one of the very first pieces that you want to address is what is going on with the IBS. Is it a GI infection that's been undiagnosed? Is it a candida overgrowth? Is it an imbalance in your gut bacteria? Or is it just foods that an inflammatory food or several inflammatory foods that could be contributing to the inflammation in your gut? It can also link back to the histamine piece, which I haven't gotten into yet, but histamine can also cause inflammation in the gut. And so that could also be a contributing factor as well. All right. And then the chronic fatigue. So a lot of times, so there's 2 things that this really stands out for me that we want to look at is your adrenal functions and what your cortisol levels are doing, because drops in cortisol or chronically low cortisol will make us feel super fatigued. It will also trigger migraines. So that could also be an underlying issue going on. Or how your body is, if you're deplete in certain nutrients, including things like CoQ10, carnitine, magnesium, things like that will actually slow down how our cells are able to process and produce energy. And so then we can feel chronically fatigued, have a lot of inflammation, and that can also contribute to migraines. So those 2 pieces, the first thing I'd want to look at is the adrenals. And again, I've talked about this again multiple times, that our you know, just simple blood work of looking at cortisol levels, not going to be enough, right? We need to look at it from a functional standpoint. And here in the next couple of weeks, I'd like to shoot or record a video on lab interpretation and how it pertains to migraines, because it's just not sufficient. So hold on for that one. That'll be future coming. If you want to, if that's something that you'd really like to listen to, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. It will alert you when it's up and running. All right, so back to Amanda. So she started her migraines at 11 to 12 years old. So one thing I'll point out here is that that's puberty time. So there's likely a hormonal component going on with that. Okay, so that would be something else to kind of investigate a little bit. The timing. So she mentions that, Amanda, you say that you have issues with migraines popping up in the middle of the night, the middle of the day, the evening. So so all of those different times of day indicate different things going on. So you don't just have one migraine that makes you feel miserable. From what you've said here, there's at least 3 different migraines that are happening. And what I mean by that is a migraine is a migraine, yes, but what's causing a particular migraine can be different. And if you really start paying attention and tracking what each of those migraines feels like, you'll start to notice different types of pain, different intensities, different prodromes, different warning signs of when a migraine is about to start. And so as you kind of learn and become more familiar, you'll start to notice there's differences in each of these migraines. And so then we can get more granular on understanding each particular migraine, because they're all going to have different triggers, which is why sometimes a medication will help cut migraines by, 15%, but doesn't touch the rest of them. It's because that particular medication has improved that particular migraine, but you have more than one kind of migraine trigger going on. Hopefully that makes sense, because I know it can be really convoluted. But so some of the things that I think of when I hear middle of the night migraines. So number 1, drops in serotonin. We've kind of already talked about that. I do think that's an issue for you. Serotonin is lowest in the early hours of the morning. So if you're waking, I don't know what you're defining as middle of the night, but 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, even 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning tends to be our lowest serotonin time. So that can be an issue. It's also when we're lowest in our cortisol levels. So again, those cortisol drops and adrenal function can be a reason for the middle of the night wakings. And then another common one is sleep apnea. So a fairly simple one to kind of take a look at, screen for, and have some sleep apnea testing done. And then blood sugar imbalances and blood sugar drops in the middle of the night can also contribute to those. So those are kind of the 4 main ones that we look at for the middle of the night wakings. The middle of the day tends to be elevations in epinephrine, norepinephrine, which is our stress neurotransmitters. So higher stress will release those. Inflammation, either whether that's environmental, from seasonal allergies or an exposure to a toxin that your body doesn't like, or, just whatever it is, or it could be a dietary inflammation thing where you're having elevated inflammation as a result of a food that you've eaten. And again, I kind of referred to that with the IBS piece. And then again, another thing is middle of the day also tends to be another very common time for a blood sugar drop and imbalance, especially if you wake up and you're not super hungry, or maybe you eat a little bit, but you only feel like carbs because you don't feel like you can eat protein or meat. And so then we get kind of an insulin spike, and then we drop. And in the afternoon is usually when we start seeing that drop happen, anywhere between, depending on when you wake up and eat, anywhere between kind of 10 and 2 tends to be where some of the blood sugar drops can happen. So it could be from that. And then evening, again, we're looking at the cortisol drops happening. So you might be fine in the morning and in the afternoon on a particular day, but maybe it was a more stressful day. And so then at nighttime, as you're relaxing a little bit and your cortisol levels are coming down, you might notice that that's when that particular migraine comes on. And that's a very common pattern where, you had a really stressful day, you feel pretty good up until the time you get home, and then bam, it hits you like that. And that's a cortisol drop. Again, for evening time, it could be food and blood sugar related. That can happen all through the day. And so just kind of starting to track it a little bit and kind of understanding, no, I ate really well. I ate 3 good meals. I had fat, protein, and carbs in each meal. My blood sugar should not have been affected. Great, we can rule that out. That's not the issue. But if you're eating high carby meals, because that's all you can kind of stomach, and you're not eating very frequently, or you're eating something high in sugar, or you have a sugar craving and then you kind of binge on that, you feel a little bit better, and then the crash happens, you get a migraine. So it could be related to that too. So just paying attention to those patterns will really help to kind of piece out which of those issues might really be going on for you. All right. All right. Then Melissa, or Amanda, sorry, you said ice and triptans help. Caffeine can help. So those things all cause vasoconstriction. So vasodilation is going to be a component, which means that your blood vessels are getting too big, and that's triggering a migraine for you. So one of the important things to look at, whether you have or have not watched my free training, Amanda, I go more in depth into how those vasodilation piece plays a role in our migraines, and also some dietary things and hints that you can do about that. So if you get a chance to watch that free training, the long and the short of it is the amount of arginine you consume through the day can play a role in that. So that might be something to take a look at. Arginine is one of our amino acids that we get through our food. And again, with the triptans, that increases serotonin. So again, there's another piece that's kind of pointing to a serotonin issue. All right. All right, getting a dry throat here. All right. A couple more pieces that I will mention here, Amanda. So you had mentioned slow stomach emptying as part of that whole IBS piece. So that can kind of tie back into a stress. Well, I'll just say it like this. We have 2 ways that our brain goes: stress, our fight or flight mode, which is called our sympathetic system, and our relaxation, parasympathetic, rest and digest mode. Chronic migraineurs are stuck. In a lot of cases, we're stuck in that sympathetic stress, fight or flight mode all the time. Our digestion happens in parasympathetic rest and digest mode. And so there is usually a correlation there of high stress, anxiety, all of those pieces that come along with it that could be contributing to the fact that your body is not emptying properly. That also shuts down our digestive enzymes, so we're not digesting and processing our food as properly, which also will lead to a lot of IBS and gut inflammation. So that's another piece that's kind of looking at that gut as being a big contributing factor to a lot of what's going on. And then I had mentioned earlier about histamine for you, and histamine is it's an amino acid. It's vitally important for our body. It is one of the ways that our immune system works. So it does a lot of stuff. It's also very stimulating. So it can cause a lot of anxiety and things like that. So if there's issues with anxiety, and that kind of stuff, histamine could be a problem. Histamine can be very inflammatory in the gut. And it also is linked to things like asthma and allergic rhinitis and seasonal allergies and eczema and things like that. And so there are a lot of people that have problems processing. They produce too much histamine, or they are exposed to things that have histamine that their body can't cut down on or process properly. And that can come back to genetics and nutrient deficiencies and all kinds of stuff. And so really kind of looking at how much is histamine playing a role for you, because I find that in a lot of my clients, working through a histamine protocol to improve how your body processes the histamine can really help to decrease that reaction, which then will decrease inflammation across the board, which then will calm down the immune system, which then will improve your inflammatory reactions, which reduces migraines, right? So there's a lot of really good things about that. So along with kind of looking at the arginine piece for you and from the dietary perspective, also taking a look at just seeing what the histamine diet, the antihistamine diet looks like, kind of maybe playing around with that a little bit could be very helpful. It's not, again, as I mentioned all the time, it's not the end all be all. We don't want to keep restricting things. We want to open things back up, but we have to restrict in order to heal. And then once we work on healing, then we can open things back up so that you're no longer so restricted. So that's the important last piece that is always missing from everybody that I talk to, is they might have figured out a handful of different things and they get rid of it and they feel better for a short period of time. But if you are not actively working on healing those imbalances, healing the gut, healing the histamine pathways, healing the detox pathways, whatever it is, then we're not going to see the healing take place, and you cannot successfully reintroduce things back into your life and your diet because the healing hasn't taken place. So you're always living in a place of restriction, and we want to work in a place of healing so we can unrestrict. So Amanda, hopefully that was helpful and not too confusing. There's actually a few more things that I noticed, but again, you know, I've already gone on for 15 minutes about this, and it can be really overwhelming if I share every piece of things that I notice. So I think this is a really good place to start. And I've actually had it before where I've had somebody, you know, like a year later re-sign up for one of these and kind of give me an updated perspective, like things they've worked on from the first half. And then they want kind of next steps, which will be, you know, in the next 6 or 12 months. So if that's the case for you and you feel like you've made progress with some of what I've shared here today, fantastic. And then feel free to jump in and do another one of these. And I'm happy to kind of reassess where you might be at and different things to focus on as you kind of work through stuff. So hopefully that makes sense for everybody else that would be watching. And again, just to kind of recap, the process that works in chronic migraines is evaluate, just like what we did, understanding some of the imbalances that are going on, eliminating, cutting out the things that we know are contributing to those imbalances. But then the last and most important step is the healing step, the alleviation step, where we're actually giving your body back the nutrients and the balance that it needs so that we can then start reintroducing all of the things that you've cut out up until now. So if we really get targeted in those biochemical pathways that are out of whack, then we can actually see that healing happen, even in super chronic cases, family history, you name it. I've seen it all. Women, I actually have one that she had a stroke when she was 10, chronic migraine since then. And now for the first time ever, her last record was 81 days migraine free. She's got her life back, right? So no matter how chronic you think you are or how hopeless a case, I promise you there is hope, okay? And I'm happy to help with that in any way that I can. So if you want more information about this kind of individualized biochemical assessment based on your whole body symptoms, then I would invite you to watch the free training I mentioned earlier on. It's linked in the video below or in the description below. And if you are interested in signing up for your own whole body migraine assessment call, I've also linked that link in the description as well. So you can feel free to take advantage of that too. So until next time.